What terrifying, horrifying, or creepy experiences have you had that may have a reasonable explanation, but still make you scream? When I was younger, my mom, grandma, and I enjoyed visiting this tiny fruit tea shop about 40 miles from our house. It was a charming little spot where you could get traditional tea and sandwiches, and adorable little desserts and everything. One time, everything went as planned, but on the way home, we got a call informing us that my other grandma had died. It was very sad, but not shocking, because she had been fighting cancer. A few months later, on the way home, we got a call informing us that my uncle had died unexpectedly from a heart attack. It was a creepy coincidence, but we didn't give it much thought at the time. A few months later, we returned a third time, and on the way home, we got the call that someone had passed away this time. It was my grandfather's brother. We never returned to that tea shop again because all of these people were elderly and not in the best of health, although their deaths at roughly the same time weren't particularly unsettling. The fact that 3 different times we visited this location, 3 people passed away on the same day, and we got the calls on the way home, makes me believe that something about it was cursed. It has since closed, but I'm still anxious to visit that area even now. My wife is affirm I'm not superstitious, but 2 of my friends were. One day, they were discussing with their mother how one of our other friends' grandfathers had recently passed away, and that someone else in their family had also recently passed away. They were worried that their grandmother would be the next to pass away, because death always comes in threes. It was very sad that they were so worried about their elderly grandma dying next, when in fact it was going to be them. I used to have a penchant for wandering around abandoned buildings when I was in my teens. My friends were killed by a drunk driver shortly after. I don't believe that death always comes in threes, but a friend and I once thought it would be a good idea to visit a farmstead that had been abandoned for years while we were in high school. The entire experience was quite strange. The farmstead was reachable by a lengthy gravel road that led to a collection of rundown buildings, centered around a central barn. We parked at the end of the gravel road. We went into the barn first, where we saw deer bones arranged in a circle around the skull and several blankets stacked in a corner of the room. We thought it was really strange and cultish, but we were wrong. So we started walking back to the car. This was close to the turnoff to the main road, so we could walk around the property and then quickly pull out. We heard blood-curdling screeching and heavy crunching footsteps halfway down the gravel road. We ran back to my car and tried to leave as quickly as we could, but my back tire was stuck in a puddle of melted snow from the previous night's snowfall, and my friend was screaming because she was so terrified, but refused to look at the path behind us. When I managed to get the car unstuck, she turned around to check if anyone was following us, but nobody was. It might have been a bird or something, but we both swear to this day that someone was following us. I actually believed I was going to die that day, bar now, every year in December. We celebrate Extra Year of Life Day as a joke. The cultish deer bone circle was crazy, but it was probably some kids filming a video or something. The footsteps and flapping wings could definitely be explained, but it was a really scary experience at the time. My family and I traveled to Dubai in 2004 when I was 7 years old. We were in the hotel pool when 2 large men entered and took the little girl, who appeared to be about my age, instead of putting her in a car. Since we were all in the pool and the daughter's mother began sobbing uncontrollably, we were forced to write a police witness report. I'm still wondering if they were able to get their little girl back if a sheik did this. I've heard the same thing about a guy in my neighborhood who traveled to Dubai and had his wife removed from a royal party because men and women eat at different times. Locations in 2012, I still didn't know anything about her. What the just wanted to know what country you're from, India. I knew it before you responded. Everyone seems to have a friend of a friend who experienced this. I've written about it before, but I was around 9 years old in 1995 on a sunny summer day. The refrigerator to grab a popsicle, and then, as I turned the corner into the hallway to my left, a guy with long brown hair who looked like a teenager and was dressed in a beige turtleneck and red plaid bell-bottoms with dark green and black stripes suddenly appeared. He disappeared as I stared at him, and I kept it a secret for years until this is happening right now. But let's go back a few months to when it all began. On a pleasant, warm day at the end of August or the beginning of September, my mother mentioned meeting the now-grown children who lived in the house before us, and they asked her if she had seen the bell-bottom ghost. I went outside and discovered this small ball of fur, a feather hair, and a hanging earring hooked on my porch. Weird. I thought I told my husband about it and let him know that I was afraid of some strange juju. On our porch, I wasn't touching it, but it had to go. He said it might have been a nice present from the tomcat next door, or something our dog had brought home. My dog has never done that before, but hey, there's a much more sensible explanation than someone dropping strange juju on our porch. Cool. Then, last week, this completely intact white-tailed deer lower mandible bone appeared on our porch in the exact spot where the hair, feather, or furball was. I ask my husband about it again, and he responds that the strange fur, feather, earring ball was still fresh in my mind, and if someone was leaving strange on the porch, I wasn't going to touch it. Thank you for taking that risk on Han. The dog must have brought it with him again. Something he's never done before, but logically, I wasn't going to touch it. It remained on the porch for a while yesterday. Facing my front door while studying, my dog starts to freak out at lunchtime. I look up to see an older, disheveled woman who I believe is on our porch, approaching our front door. She leaves something on the bench outside and turns around before leaving. After a little while, I get up to pick up whatever pamphlet she is holding. She didn't leave a pamphlet, but she did come onto our porch, take the lower mandible bone, and place it on the bench between the porch fence posts, directly in the line of a bright ray of sunlight. As a result, I'm fairly certain that someone is leaving strange on our porch. Hopefully, we're not cursed. I hope you're doing well, whoever you are. If she ever brings you another bone with a pull to it, think about moving. I don't want to worry you, but she might be making nothing. You can Google it. Or she might just be a strange woman who used to live there and is becoming senile. I remember being home one Saturday morning as a kid. To set the scene, my mom used to often go for work on Saturday mornings and return home by 12 o'clock p.m. Back to the story. I was watching TV on the couch when the clock struck 12, indicating that my mom was almost home. I can still clearly recall hearing a car door close. I had a similar experience with my mom when I was around 12 or 13. I had just been chatting with her when I started to walk upstairs while she was in the kitchen, and then I heard her say, "Oh, super." When I got up to go greet her, there was nobody there. It still frightens me. I was perplexed because I hadn't said or done anything to deserve such a reaction. So I went back into the kitchen and asked her what that was all about. She had no idea what I was talking about, like I could really understand. Loud, as children, my brother and I would stay up late playing video games because we didn't have school the following morning. It was possibly 3 a.m., but it was clear from her face that she wasn't just having me on. She was just as perplexed as I am and insisted she didn't hear anything. I still wonder what happened there. After we turned it off and put the controllers away, we both heard heavy, slow footsteps coming from the kitchen. Since the kitchen was the only room without carpet, they sounded rather menacing. So we looked at each other and I went to bed. My room is at the end of the hall, and my brother's is right next to mine, shouted Dad. Then we heard footsteps coming back towards our laundry room, which is also where our basement door is. We knew something wasn't right, so we both started calling for our parents, who hurried to us, all of us exhausted and bewildered. We frantically describe what we heard. My dad investigates and informs us that all the doors are still locked and closed, and nothing indicates that anyone was inside the house. A murderer breaking in and fleeing when we called out is a plausible explanation. But I've always wondered what if it was a murder ghost. Instead, my dad told me about his time visiting friends in California after graduating from college, just before the 1980s Night Stalker killings. My mom stayed at home because she was sick and she was actually expecting me. My dad was sleeping on his friend's couch when he heard someone walking around, so he called out. Someone may have climbed in the back window of the house, and my 6'4" to 140 pounds. The college football player's dad scared him off by calling out. It's kind of a dark joke in the family that my dad scared Richard Ramirez away. but my mom despises it. He heard his roommates' names, then the walking stopped, and then nothing. I used to work with this guy who was approached by Jeffrey Dahmer at a bar in the early 70s, before he started killing people, and Jeffrey gave him his name and number so they could hang out sometime. It's pretty crazy to think about that because the dates and location fit so well, that it very well could have been him trying it out in his early years before he started killing. When it came time for dinner, I knocked on my mom's door to come and eat. A few years ago, I lived with my mother and a German Shepherd in a 2-bedroom rented townhouse. My co-worker never did hang out with him, but he still has the paper somewhere Jeffrey gave him. I heard her grunt in response to the cigarette smoke, so I went back downstairs and ate by myself, figuring I would just put a plate away for her. Fast forward to around 2 a.m. someone grabbing my hand and gently shaking it wakes me up, and I instantly look around at my dog, who is quite protective, and spends every night with me, even though she isn't in bed. Although she isn't in the room, she was definitely on my bed when I went to sleep. I sleep with the bedroom door locked and closed, and she is scratching at it from the hallway. I run for the door, letting her in, and she searches the entire room while I'm screaming for my mother. I knocked on my mom's door and got no response, so I just opened it. She wasn't even home, but the bed was made and her TV was off. My dog and I looked everywhere in the house, and nothing seemed out of place. All the doors and windows were still locked, and I was, to put it mildly, terrified. When I contacted my mother the following day, she informed me that she had left early the day before to visit my ailing grandfather. Who was holding your hand? Did the grunt sound masculine or feminine? If so, I'm going to assume it was a cold. My mother had a naturally raspy voice that was amplified by years of smoking, so her grunts are pretty deep. I've had dogs lock themselves out of rooms numerous times, and all 3 of my mastiffs could do that. I'm a lonely ghost, but I don't know. I noped myself right out of that house, though. Nope, so hard I moved to another state. She could open the bathroom door, because there was no better way to do it than with a stick handle. But my bedroom was just a typical door. Then they would be stupid enough to lie on the floor outside of it, hit it with their fat ass, and then shut themselves out again, just lying there like they don't know how to open the door. I'll type out a few quick facts. She had locked herself in the bathroom several times. Between 2001 and 2003 in Morgantown, Indiana, at a location known as the ANTM room. Regretfully, it is no longer there. The round doorknob had a turn lock rather than a push-in button, and she never knew how to open those. It was unsettling, to say the least. On a few occasions, after closing time, I was cleaning up when I heard what sounded like a small child crying. It was soft, and every time I tried to approach the sound, it seemed to get farther away or move into a different area of the restaurant. A friend of mine worked there with me, and once, after hours, she heard her call my name from the front of the restaurant, and I heard her call her name from inside the stockroom. We ran into each other while we were heading to answer the calls, and we were both very perplexed when we discovered that neither of us had called the other at all. Finally, and most horrifyingly, to people I knew died very quickly. After dining at Annie M's, I was the one who served them their final meals on both occasions. One died in an accident, and the other had a heart attack. So it truly frightens me that I served to distinct people their final meals. While reading the Ars Geschichte to get ideas for a short story I wanted to write soon after I began to hear this jingle coming. From my bedroom window in the middle of the night, I realized that nothing, not even a wind chime in the backyard or the houses of my neighbors, could have caused it. One morning, I woke up to find my grandpa's painting upside down. A few days later, most of it was explained. It turned out that there was an arch Dada's very close to our house, and the bells in the tower would go off if the wind was just right. My boyfriend did the majority of the turning because he knows I enjoy creepy things. The knives were all in the wrong way in the holder, and then the garbage can was backwards. Household items backwards, and came clean when I started to feel afraid, rather than just enjoying it. The only inexplicable thing is my grandfather's painting, and my reaction to it is what caused my boyfriend to become angry with me. You weren't reading it aloud, were you? He decided to run with it, but he didn't flip it. You weren't reading it aloud, were you? However, I did sketch some of the symbols. I don't advise it because I have insomnia, which causes me to have hallucinations when I get less than 2 hours of sleep in 3 days. I'm not even aware that I'm having hallucinations. I was going to go to bed when I found myself sitting in the dark in the living room. I know I had one of those long, exciting family days when I was around 12. Basically, we left our house at midnight to go fishing and didn't return until around 3 in the morning. I lost consciousness and walked there, but I can't help but think I teleported. I didn't get any sleep the following day and spent the entire day swimming, hiking, etc. I was up for more than 48 hours during that time, so when we finally got home, I went to sleep in my cousin's room. He had one of those movie posters for the Flintstones on his wall, and I sat there for a while watching the Flintstones move in that poster while laughing and talking. Before realizing it wasn't a TV, after that, I fell asleep on the couch. That, and wouldn't sleep in his room until that poster was removed. I know that the hallucinations were caused by sleep deprivation, but I still moved into a cottage on the mountain, and my backyard was surrounded by trees. The moon shone so beautifully that it didn't feel like night at all, and I started having recurrent dreams. Every time I had the same dream, I would see myself sleeping in my bed, and then the scene would change from third person to first person. I would wake up to a woman whispering, and my thirst would become so intense that I would get out of bed, open the French doors, and go to the kitchen sink to get a glass of water. The voice grew louder as I got closer to the sink, but I was still unable to understand it. It sounded like a foreign language, but it wasn't one I had heard before or since. Then, as I stood in my kitchen, gazing out the window above the sink toward the tree line in my backyard, which was brightly lit by the moon, the voice abruptly became clear. She said, "The devil is in the woods." At this moment, a shadow swiftly sped behind the tree line, and I would awaken from my dream to find myself standing in my kitchen, exactly where I had been in the dream. This occurred nearly every week for the whole time I lived in that house, and it always happened close to up to, or precisely at 3 a.m. It was a vast area off the backside of the mountain, and the only somewhat eerie item I could discover was a rundown old shack. The only way to respond to this is to say, "Don't go in the woods, bro." You suppose I wandered out there during the day? This is the one that scares me the most. How long did you live there? I lived there for about a year before having to move again for work. I had terrible nightmares and recurring dreams, but none of them were the same except that I would frequently wake up gasping as I struggled against something I couldn't see for air, so I'm thinking that I may have had sleep apnea for a while. I had a sleep study done a few years later, and I was fine. Everything stopped when I moved, which is what most worries me. How many consecutive coincidences does it take to start questioning whether this is all a coincidence? I've already posted this, but here it is again. Our family dog, a mutt that resembled a short-haired lassie, would sleep at the foot of our bed every night when I was around 6 years old. Again, the logical explanation is sleep paralysis. But I've never had anything like this before or after this incident. I shared a queen-sized bed with my older sister when I was in elementary school. Around midnight one night, I noticed a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure had no eyes or face and was completely black. I tried to wake her up, but she rolled over and went back to sleep. I think my sister kicked the dog because she woke up, lifted her head, and began growling at the figure. My sister and I are still convinced that we saw a ghost or other demon in our room, and we know we are not insane because the dog also saw it. The growling at the foot of the bed then woke her up, and she saw the figure and began screaming. When my parents entered the room and turned on the light, nothing was there. Observed the same thing, and a dog that responded to it. Sleep paralysis isn't really a logical explanation anymore. This one is a little unsettling, but it's also reassuring. My grandmother, who is a no-nonsense kind of broad, told me this story, and I believe everything she said. My grandma had a friend who tragically lost her husband, passed away unexpectedly from cardiac arrest or something similar when she was about 40 years old. This woman was devastated because, for a few years following his passing, she was unable to dream of her husband. For some reason, it really disturbed her that she was unable to have a dream in which he was present. It was almost as if she had been waiting for it. Nevertheless, a while goes by, and this woman is getting ready to sell her home and move closer to her children. They lived in a state that was over when she suddenly got her wish. She begins to dream, and her husband appears in each of these dreams. Her husband wakes her up, sits down on the bed, and begins talking to her in each dream. She can't make out a single word, and her speech terrifies her. It was described to me as backwards or garbled, and I imagine it's something like the way Twin Peaks characters speak in the Black Lodge. A few days before she's going to move out permanently, she goes to bed and dreams about him once more. The dream is the same, except she understands a single word he says. And then, almost as if in a panic, he grabs her in the dream and keeps saying, "Rails." She wakes up shaken but goes back to sleep. And the following day, while packing in the basement, she looks up and notices the rafters. She recalls the dream and feels compelled to reach into them, which she does, extracting thousands of dollars. Context: my grandfather was a truck driver and taught me everything I know. She claims that her husband never told her about the World War II bonds he had bought, but he showed up in her dream to tell her so she wouldn't leave them behind when she sold the house. This story still chills me to this day. I had experience driving, especially in the snow. I used to work at a drugstore, and one night, while I was closing another location in our chain, a snowstorm dropped a few inches of snow on our neighborhood. I wasn't familiar with the area, and I wasn't used to driving my mom's car, so I couldn't see. I was creeping home in a panic, watching cars spin out all around me, when I suddenly noticed a light in my passenger side view mirror. I turned to face my deceased grandfather, who was sitting in the passenger seat, looking as calm as day. I heard him say that he knew that a little snow wouldn't frighten me, and then I heard his voice rattling off. When I saw him, it was more like, "Okay, Pops, here I am. I'm okay," rather than "Oh my God, you're supposed to be dead. What the fuck?" As a result of all he taught me about driving in the snow, I looked back towards the road, and he was gone. It was a peaceful experience. Panicking and made it home without incident. It was probably just my eyes, brain, or whatever was trying to calm me down. But it still terrifies me to this day. My grandfather was buried yesterday, and this story helped me cope. I would appreciate a believable explanation. By the way, this is back when I lived in New Zealand. I would go for nighttime walks in the forest with a friend at around 2 in the morning. I won't even ask. We were around 14 years old, having a great time talking and everything, when our friend suddenly appeared and struck up a conversation with us. I was ecstatic. Then he simply vanished, leaving us both physically exhausted. It was then that we realized we had never met this friend, and that we were still 10 kilometers from town, and another 2 kilometers from the country. The friend knew both of our names and things he shouldn't have, such as specifics about my room and things that happened to me before I moved into the country. I never really saw my friend at our campsite. I just lay there for a long time recuperating. I kind of knew he was with us, but I can't remember his voice either. All I remember is him asking to take us to his house. Fortunately, he had the common sense to keep me from leaving. That left turn led to this unfenced lookout with like a 5-meter down to rocks. I don't even want to consider what would have occurred if I had listened to Scary. This happened to 2 people simultaneously, and you claim you don't remember seeing it or hearing it directly, but I kind of just knew it was there. He was present and acknowledged that we had spoken, but I am unable to adequately describe his voice. It was a legitimate conversation between the 3 of us, not just in my imagination. Have you asked your real friend about it and what his slasher perspective is on things? I recall being around 10 or 15 years old, give or take a few years, and my friends and I got easily carried away with things. It's kind of hard to explain, but I wasn't old enough to know what was real or possible, and neither were they. It wasn't like lying or sending someone on a snipe hunt. Yes, we had a lengthy conversation about a month after it happened, and he was really upset by it, but I managed to get him to talk. He was in a bad place for a few weeks after I asked him to tell me everything about it, but he told me that he was driving himself crazy waiting for it to reappear, which it never did. He described it perfectly, though, and he did seem a little more sane than I was at the time, which saved my life, even though we were young at the time. We were distinct from one another since we both came from dysfunctional families. which caused us to mature more quickly. He was the soul I would put greater trust in this individual. Compared to a 22, and we spent 3 days hunting. Journey together.